Okay, welcome back. It's time to review the first assignment that you guys were assigned. This was a pretty simple and gentle introduction into the work that we're going to do for the next few weeks. So really, we just wanted to become familiar with the skeleton and the landmarks because we're going to use those a lot as we move forward. So just a quick walkthrough of the label section. We're going to do this from the top down. And we have first skull, simple. Second one right here, this is a clavicle, obviously. This guy is pointing at the acromion process, which is also part of the scapula. So credit for both. Humerus right here. This guy points at the costal cartilage of the rib cage. Specifically down here, it's looking at the false ribs. Costal cartilage of the false ribs. And then this guy is pointing to the radius. You can see barely, but small at the top, and it expands to the widest section at the wrist. And that leaves this guy looking at the ulna down to the extremity, the distal end of the ulna is the styloid process. This guy points at the femur, the big bone of the leg, and this guy points at the tibia, which is the big bone of the lower leg. Over here we have the patella, slightly triangular shape. We'll talk more about the legs in a few weeks. Moving back up to the upper body, this is pointing at the phalanges, which are the digits of the fingers. Right, a single digit is a phalanx, and collectively they're known as the phalanges. Metacarpals, moving our way back up the hand, 5 metacarpals, first being the thumb, second, third, fourth, fifth, out to the pinky finger. And then we have the carpals of the wrist, and those mate again with the distal ends of the radius and the ulna. Okay, moving back up, this guy is pointing at the pelvis, and we're specifically looking at the pubic bones, or if you label the landmark, it's the pubic symphysis. This box is pointing at the iliac crest, or the bone is the ilium, or the landmark at this point is the anterior superior iliac spine, remember? Okay, moving up, this guy is the ribs, the actual bones of the ribs. This guy is pointing at the sternum proper, which is the bottom section, to be distinguished from the manubrium, which is up here. And we'll see why that's important when we get to the chest muscles in a little bit. Okay, moving over to the back, we have first the all-important scapula. I didn't make you draw the scapula, perhaps I should have, but I want you guys to be familiar with the shape. At the very least, the landmarks, which you did in the next assignments, but just become familiar with kind of the spade shape of the plate of the scapula as well, because it will help you visualize through the skin how this whole thing kind of moves as a mass. Moving down, we have again the ilium, or the iliac crest. The other bone of the pelvis right here is the sacrum. Remember, we have posterior superior iliac spines right here, brachius maximus down here, and the sacrum leaves us with this triangular shape, which is the sacral triangle. Okay, this box is pointing at the ischium, which are your sitting bones. The ischial tuberosities are these big protrusions. Down here we have the head of the fibula, or the full thing is the fibula. Then we have 3 sections of the spine right here. The cervical vertebrae, 1 through 7. Then we have the thoracic vertebrae, which each correspond to a rib. So it's 1 to 12. And then we have the lumbar vertebrae in the bottom, which is 1 to 5. Okay, that's it for labeling. Simple enough. Hopefully everybody at least cross-referenced your notes and got these all correct, because there's no reason not to. Okay, so now let's review what we had to do with locating the landmarks. So I went over this one when I was giving the assignment, but again, just to refresh what we're trying to accomplish. Some people were asking about trying to draw the whole skeleton through the figure, and while that is a good exercise, it's very time-consuming and often not entirely relevant. I think if we're going to concentrate our efforts, the most important thing is to know where the bones are on the surface. So what we have is the chromium process. Great place to start all the time. Locate the point of the shoulder. Notice on this guy that there's no muscle covering it, even though he's well developed. Spine of the scapula. Sometimes you're going to have to intuit the actual line of it, but you can pretty much find the acromion and the internal border. So a line placed somewhat diagonally is usually fairly accurate. And use any kind of surface clues to help you place that. Once we know more about the muscles, those will also help us guide it. Okay, and then we find the medial border going down. Okay, no problem. Now moving out, arm is encased in muscle until we get to the elbow. And we have the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. We have the medial epicondyle down there on both sides. And then we have, on a straight arm, the olecranon going down, which is actually the start of the head of the ulna. And that gives rise to the ulnar furrow, which takes us always down to the styloid process of the ulna at the wrist. Okay. And here we have the 7th cervical vertebra. You can start to make out a few of the little spines of the lumbar vertebrae down here. And also, let's not forget the styloid process of the radius. And there. And that's enough for this guy. Obviously, the metacarpals are exposed, as well as the majority of the phalanges, but we're not going to worry about that. Okay, so what we were actually looking at with you guys for the assignment is average man swimming on his white cube. And what we're looking at is quite naturalistic, so this is not over the top like the previous guys. So we really have to kind of start where we know, which again a good place is right at the acromion process. Slightly out of view and perspective right now, but we know where it is, and we'll use that to start looking for evidence of the spine of the scapula. And you can see if you follow with me here, it looks pretty much like the line that we know, and going off into the distance is quite foreshortened on this side, so it's a lot smaller. From there, we have a little turnabout, and we go down for the medial border. And again, the same thing here. Easy enough. 7th cervical vertebra, we can't see it because there's skin folded over top of it, but it's right there. Moving our way out to the elbow, we have all our landmarks here again. Medial epicondyle, olecranon, and the lateral epicondyle. And again, when you're at the olecranon, you can start to look for this line. Has a slight bend in it, up, and then a straight descent down to the head of the ulna at the wrist. And on this arm, the opposing arm, going off away from the camera, you can see quite distinctly the medial epicondyle. And this is what it looks like. And the arm is slightly bent, so these aren't quite aligned as in an axis. Olecranon going down, and then the lateral epicondyle out here. Styloid process down there. The ulnar furrow is going to move back something like this. Okay, working our way down the back now. Do we see anything else? Not really until we get to the very base. And right here we're going to have the posterior superior iliac spines. And that's going to give us the posterior extremity of the iliac crest. So we're going to dot it up here, where it actually is internal, covered by the flank fat. and then it starts to reveal itself down here, where it works its way anteriorly to the anterior superior iliac spine, which is right there. Okay, we haven't talked much about the landmarks on the legs, so I'm not going to cover these. And we'll get into that in about 3 weeks. Okay, next image. Okay, average man doing a push-up. So what we have here is a pretty good showcase of what the shoulder looks like in life and how the whole clamp of the shoulder fits together. So we'll start with the clavicles at the pit of the neck. So right in here we have sternum going down, so manubrium. Look at this little inflection right there. That would be important. Exposed sternum down here. So chest muscles on either side. A little triangular plate at the very base. So we have the heads of the clavicles right here, pit of the neck. And you can see only the top edge of the clavicle for the first half. And then you start to see the roundness of the body here. And that is almost always the case. We'll talk more about that when we talk about the pectoralis major. And then we go out and it starts to be covered by the front deltoid, but then it mates with the acromion. You see a fairly reliable rectangular shape. The acromion we know is the extremity of the spine of the scapula, so the spine of the scapula follows straight off. You can actually see, look at the concavity here. It's a dead giveaway that we have muscle mass bulging above and the deltoid bulging below and the spine running right between them. So that's what's happening, and it's going around to the back out of view. Okay, working our way down. We're not seeing much costal cartilage down in the rib cage, mostly because his stomach muscles are flexed. So these are all a muscle called the external oblique, which we'll talk about later in this week's lectures. Okay, so forgetting that, we'll look down a little further and we can start to see what is the anterior superior iliac spine, iliac crest going back, and that actually ends up sending a ligament from the anterior superior iliac spine to the very floor of the pelvis of the pubic symphysis, and that really gives us a very distinct border between the stomach and the torso above and the legs below. Okay, so these are the landmarks right here. And then we're talking about on the arms the same landmarks that we've discussed. On the outside, I think is the only one that we can really see, the lateral epicondyle. And in here actually it's kind of hidden. It's underneath this big ridge muscle. Down at the wrist, the majority of the block of the wrist, remember, is the radius, and the ulna sits on the outside. Okay, moving forward one more. So this guy is actually showing us a lot of landmarks just because he's so contorted. And a few good things, go through it fairly quickly. Change colors to red because he's very white. So clavicles, behind there we have the acromion process, the sternum working our way down, and then we actually start to see a very nicely defined instance of costal cartilage. Right, so you can start to see how this is shown when somebody is stretched back and the stomach is not flexed. You start to see relief from the costal cartilage in this area. Okay, at the elbow, this elbow is very bent, so we start to see triangular shape between our three landmarks, the epicondyles and the olecranon. This view, medial epicondyle, lateral epicondyle, is back behind this big ridge muscle, which we have to wait until we talk about forearms to really understand. Okay, let's see. Keep it at red. Move down to the hips. you can really see the line of the iliac crest sitting here. We know that it finishes the anterior superior iliac spine, which actually is going to be sitting right at this inflection. All right, so you can see the leg muscle going in, and then you can see this muscle, the external oblique, coming up. So that's kind of the giveaway that the anterior superior iliac spine is right there. And then we have in here the greater trochanter of the femur sitting right on the surface. So we see muscles kind of radiating around that. Okay, other obvious things, the patella, more landmarks going down. This is the tibia, and then we have landmarks down at the ankle, which we'll discuss more when we get to the legs. Okay, one more thing while we're here, just before we finish. Looking at the pinky side of this guy's hand, head of the ulna, and then, just to be complete, the ulnar furrow is coming back like this. And this is going to be really important because it separates the flexors on this side from the extensors of the forearm muscle. Okay, so that's that guy. Moving forward, this is not from your assignment, but I just wanted to show it as a really good example of why we locate all these things. 19th century French painting, and everything that we've talked about so far is on this. So scapula, landmarks here, landmarks at the elbow. Look at that medial epicondyle right there. It's jumping out at us. Look at the greater trochanter, just sitting right in between a mass of hip muscles. Iliac crest, look at the anterior superior iliac spine sitting right here. You can even see it poking out just a little bit. Iliac crest working back. 7th cervical vertebra sits right in there. In this guy, you can see a nice bony protrusion where the sternum meets the manubrium. Clavicle going up, nice little bridge here. Then the S shape coming in, mating with the acromion process. And the acromion process is working its way out like this. This is the medial border of the scapula. Okay, look at this. Look at that big landmark right there, head of the ulna. Okay, so that's it for this exercise. And I hope everybody did their reading. Because it actually is great stuff, and you can continue to read the Loomis book, and I'll try to give you more relevant passages in future assignments. So now we're going to move on to start talking about the pectoral muscles, the deltoids, and the abdominal muscles. See you in a few minutes.